I've already settled the contract, all thanks to me. Now I get the $10 million incentive. As soon as I returned from my appointments, Steve dropped this bombshell. It seems that Steve, incredibly, went ahead and finalized the negotiations I had been carefully handling in my absence. The contract was struggling due to the other party's reluctance to compromise, and I couldn't understand how it was settled so quickly. Receiving the contract from Steve and checking it, I had to bitterly laugh at the reason. If the contract was concluded with these terms, Company C would face serious trouble. But since Steve had gone ahead and finalized it on his own, it was out of my hands now. Really, thank you. Now I can resign without any worries. I had wanted to wrap up this negotiation quickly and thanked Steve sarcastically for snatching it away. This deal was directly entrusted to me by the president, and I was handling the negotiations. But now that it turned out this way, Steve was the one responsible. I'm not Steve's boss, nor did I instruct him. He made his own decisions, so I bear no responsibility for this matter. Anticipating trouble due to the contract he concluded, I quickly resigned from Company C, taking advantage of the fact that I had already submitted my resignation. After my resignation, Company C was thrown into chaos due to the contract Steve signed. Eventually, various truths came to light, and Steve faced a lot of trouble. I am Nathan Reynolds, a 43-year-old salesperson at Company C, just an ordinary employee. I've not been very adept since joining the company, often failing and having to apologize to clients. However, each time I fail, I reflect on what went wrong and try to improve. If there's something I don't understand, I ask my superiors and study sales techniques during my free time, diligently putting in effort. As a result, my sales performance is now among the top in my department. Now a veteran in sales, I'm consulted by juniors, and sometimes the president entrusts me with important matters. My achievements have even attracted headhunting offers from other companies. After 20 years of hard work, I can see my performance and compensation gradually increasing, which makes me happy, and I want to continue polishing my career. However, lately, one of my colleagues from my department started to bother me. Give me that deal, Nathan. Come on, you don't mind, right? The one cozying up to me with these words is Steve Manning, who joined Company C as a fresh graduate alongside me. His sales performance is average, neither good nor bad. Although he used to outperform me, he hasn't grown much since our entry, so now I am far ahead. When we joined together, Steve hardly ever spoke to me, and we didn't interact much. But lately, for some reason, he's been talking to me more, asking me to hand over deals every time. I frown at Steve's behavior. It's not impossible to hand over a negotiation, but usually one doesn't simply hand over dealings without any specific reasons. The contract I work to secure through discussions is something I'm supposed to handle until the end, as that maintains the client's trust. Steve has been in sales for 20 years. He should understand this, yet I wonder why he suddenly started saying such things. Perhaps he's recently become concerned that his sales performance hasn't improved over the past 2 decades. Even so, I think it's questionable to seek contracts from others before making an effort yourself. Come on, you've made enough sales already. Giving me a little won't shake your top ranking, right? That's the result of my hard work and actively selling to various stores and companies. I didn't get any of these deals by having them handed to me. Before you covet someone else's contract, why don't you try visiting various companies and making your own contacts? That's what I suggest to Steve. My sales achievements come from tirelessly making calls and running around companies. It's wrong to hand them over just out of kindness, and it's disrespectful to the other party. Therefore, Steve should also make efforts by visiting various companies. Perhaps that would improve his underperforming sales. But upon hearing my words, Steve says, "Nah, I don't suit working up a sweat like you do." I'm appalled by his negligent words. Unfit for a salesperson. What's that about? Sales are all about going out there. That's too much work. Work should be about doing it casually and earning easily. That's the most comfortable. Indeed, Steve's point might have some merit. Some people prefer to work leisurely and enhance their private lives. However, it's an individual's prerogative, and it's out of the question to aim to improve sales performance by taking it easy and receiving deals from others. It's nerve-wracking to think that he would let others find contracts and only handle negotiations himself. Seeing his unmotivated attitude, I sigh deeply. Come on, just one deal. You can secure another contract. So, you want me to secure a contract and hand it over to you? Yeah, sounds about right. Steve responds lightly, smiling. Despite the inconvenience it would cause the other party, he shows no guilt about receiving the contract. That makes no sense. You go out there and secure your own contracts, but I might not secure a contract even if I go. That's obvious. But still, you need to go around various shops and companies. That's what sales is about. Despite working for 20 years, he doesn't understand this basic principle. Letting others do the company rounds and only handling negotiations is shameless. The most challenging part of sales is calling potential clients and visiting companies. Avoiding this hard work is why his sales performance hasn't improved even after 20 years. Sales are tough, but there are incentives and performance displays to motivate. However, these systems don't seem to inspire any motivation in Steve. You want to work easily, right? Let's relax a bit more. I deeply sigh within at his lack of willingness to work. He's trying to take my negotiations, suggesting we relax a bit. Right now, I'm the one being forced to work for free. No matter how many times you say it, my stance won't change. I will see through the negotiations I'm handling with responsibility. So, no matter what you say, I have no intention of handing them over. Come on, just one would be okay. Even if it's just one, I've worked hard to secure that negotiation. If only work could always be easy. Everyone would prefer not to work if possible. However, I know that being lazy at work leads to painful consequences. The time spent being lazy cannot be retrieved later. Thinking it's a pity he doesn't see the effort others are putting in, I get back to work for the day. When I return from outside calls, I drink a warm beverage and let out a deep sigh. The tension is released, and I feel profoundly tired. Currently, I am advancing $10 million negotiation with Company A. This is a very important deal, personally entrusted to me by the President. I am delighted to be entrusted with such a large contract. Thinking this, I visited the other parties several times to conclude the contract. But as I returned exhausted, Steve came to me. Nathan, how's that $10 million negotiation going? Everyone in the department knows I'm handling the $10 million deal. So it's not strange that Steve asks about it. But would people normally ask about someone else's negotiations the moment they return to the office? Besides, it's supposed to be working hours now. Yet here he is, concerned about my negotiation status, always seeming like he's hardly working. Faced with Steve's question, I frown. Why do I have to tell you? Speaking of which, did you actually go out and do some sales today? Come on, don't be so secretive. It's $10 million, so everyone's curious, Steve replies. Steve often asks me to hand over negotiations. It's clear he's trying to snatch this $10 million deal whenever possible. Sensing his intent, I speak plainly. I don't plan on telling you about this. Talking too freely can lead to information leaks. It won't be a problem as long as it doesn't leave the company. A little bit should be fine. That's not the point. If we don't draw clear lines, even in small matters, it shows in our daily attitudes. It's natural for the other party not to want to deal with employees who speak carelessly about contract details. These small attentions to detail translate into our attitudes during negotiations. However, Steve, desperate for the $10 million deal, isn't backing down easily. Come on, just tell me. Since he was being too persistent, I spoke up clearly. Seriously, you're being too persistent. What's that? There's no need to say that much. We're peers after all, he protests. I'm just telling the truth. I said I wouldn't talk about it, but you keep pressing. Humph. Must be nice being an elite. With all you earn, you could afford to share a little. Watching him walk away as he said that, I let out a sigh. It's not about being an elite or not, but there's no need to hand over negotiations out of kindness. He should consider his actions before speaking. Before suggesting such despicable acts as stealing deals, Steve has plenty of effort he should be making to improve his sales performance. I look at the contract brought back from Company A and reflect on today's negotiations. The $10 million negotiation with Company A would be great if we could contract successfully, but the negotiation details are quite troublesome. I want to strike a fair deal, but Company A, being a major corporation, is reluctant to make concessions. Still, I listen to Company A's wishes and offer conditions, negotiating to find a beneficial agreement for both sides. I hope to find a middle ground, but with the other party being stubborn, it's hard to tell how long it will take to reach a fair contract. Afterward, I report the progress of the negotiations to the president. Hearing about Company A's reluctance to concede, the president also grunts in frustration. We both want to secure the $10 million contract, but given the amount involved and the company's firm stance, it's challenging. After reporting on the meeting, I discuss my future compensation with the president, following his suggestions. I thought we had already settled on my compensation, but the president seems to want to negotiate further with me. After listening to the president for a while, I left his office. I want to finish the $10 million negotiation quickly, but it's tricky since I can't just rush it. Then, a few days later, as I was visiting clients and working smoothly, the incident happened abruptly. I've already settled the contract, all thanks to me. Now I get the $10 million incentive. As soon as I return from making rounds, Steve triumphantly tells me. Hearing his words, I'm shocked. While I was away at another negotiation, Steve had done something outrageous. Eager to understand what happened, I asked Steve, "What do you mean, Steve? Want to know how I won this contract?" Steve then explains what happened. Today or tomorrow, Company A wanted to negotiate a $10 million deal and called Company C. An employee in the sales department initially took the call, but upon realizing it was from Company A, Steve snatched the phone away. He answered in my stead, saying he would go to Company A today. Thus, Steve went to negotiate at Company A and easily signed the contract I had been cautiously advancing. Stunned by his reckless action, I was almost speechless. Seeing my expression, Steve brags smugly. "This means I'm top in sales this month. How does it make you feel?" Steve says this, but a negotiation that had been so difficult couldn't have progressed so easily. Having negotiated with Company A numerous times, I know the complexity of this deal. It's not something that could be fairly concluded by Steve after just one discussion. I ask Steve, "Can I see the contract? There are some points I'm curious about." "What? Are you jealous?" "You can look, but don't tear it up." Why would I do that? Unlike Steve, I don't harbor jealousy or engage in dishonest acts. Besides, a backup of the contract would be saved in the database, so any petty retaliation would be futile. I take the contract from Steve and check its content. Seeing that the parts I had been negotiating on hadn't been altered at all, I can't help but chuckle bitterly. If he really did sign the contract, this could lead to big trouble. Well, it's fine. It's none of my concern now. Jealous, huh? Isn't it great how easily a company agreed to the contract? But I'm no longer involved. After the $10 million negotiation concluded, I had already settled things with the president. Since Steve went ahead on his own, this matter is no longer under my jurisdiction. I tell Steve, "I was planning to resign after this negotiation. You've saved me the trouble of handing it over to someone." "Is that so? That's perfect then." Steve is surprised to hear I'm quitting. But more than that, he's overwhelmed by the joy of having secured the $10 million deal and doesn't seem much concerned about my resignation. He believes this successful deal will bring him a hefty incentive, but I know that won't be the case. Sorry, just because I settled the $10 million negotiation. Unaware of what's to come, Steve is gleefully celebrating, and I sarcastically throw in my thanks. Really, thank you. Now I can resign without any concerns. I want no part in the troubles that are likely to unfold at Company C. With this in mind, I briefly inform the president that Steve has taken care of the $10 million deal, and then I swiftly leave the company as previously arranged. You've caused a $10 million loss. What are you going to do about it? About a week later, Steve calls me. I had expected major trouble, and indeed, Steve reacted just as expected, so I can't help but chuckle. While I don't want to be involved, I'm curious about how it all happened. Thinking this, I decide to ask Steve, what exactly happened? When I asked, Steve Manning began to explain the situation. It seems that Steve, dazzled by the amount of $10 million, signed the contract on the spot as Company A suggested, without properly checking the contract details. However, the contract presented by Company A was full of terms unfavorable to Company C, such as orders being able to cancel at any time, shipping costs being borne by Company C, and requiring immediate delivery upon contact. While it's understandable that Company A, being a large corporation, would take a strong stance, from my experience of reviewing many contracts, I can't help but say that these terms are overly unfair. Normally, these would be terms to decline, but the connection with Company A and the $10 million negotiation are too significant to pass up. Thus, the president asked me to somehow make the contract more equitable, and I was persistently negotiating with Company A. However, before I could secure fair terms, Steve intervened and signed the contract without any improvement in the conditions. Given the current structure of Company C, it is impossible to meet the overwhelmingly favorable conditions for Company A. Moreover, altering our operations to meet Company A's demands would place too much burden on our company, ultimately harming our profits. Thus, the only option would be to cancel the contract, but then Company C would have to pay a penalty fee. No one wants to pay a penalty, but we can't leave an unfeasible contract unaddressed. Consequently, Company C had to cancel the contract with Company A and ended up paying $10 million as a penalty fee. This resulted in a huge penalty payment and, ultimately, damaged the trust of Company A and its group. This has been a massive loss for Company C. Surely, it must have caused quite an uproar within Company C when the facts were revealed. Knowing this would happen, I resigned from Company C before the major trouble began. By the time the truth came out, I, who was originally in charge of the contract, was already gone. It certainly wasn't ideal for Company C to have me, the most suitable person to handle the situation, resign so swiftly. However, this situation was caused by Steve acting independently without consulting me, the person in charge, and since the contract was already signed, I believe my presence wouldn't have changed the situation. Above all, it is clear that Steve is to blame for recklessly signing a contract with Company A, so it's unreasonable to expect me to solve this. The president is now consulting with a legal advisor to see if the penalty can be reduced. However, given that a contract was already signed due to an employee's mistake, it's uncertain how much the penalty can be reduced. Considering the severity of Steve accepting the negotiation on his own, and subsequently causing the company to pay $10 million in penalties and lose trust, he was fired. I'm no longer with the company, but it seems like a just outcome to me. This is why one should not interfere in contracts handled by others. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know this consultation involved such malicious content. Why would I say anything? Your actions were certainly suspicious, but who would think you'd go as far as to steal the deal? It would have been nice if you just said this contract was difficult and that you would handle it. Why should I have to say something like that every time? It's obviously your fault for stealing the deal, and even if I had said something, you would have taken it anyway. I say, exasperated. It's clear he brought this on himself. Yet here he is, still trying to blame others. Because of you, I got a severe scolding from the president and was even kicked out of the company. It's been terrible. That's unfortunate. Damn it, it's all your fault. If only you had given me the other negotiations. Why should I be blamed for this? The $10 million deal was a special case, entrusted to me directly by the president, but generally, negotiations are something you secure by visiting various stores and companies yourself. That's common sense, but perhaps Steve, who has been slacking for the past 20 years, doesn't understand that. If one lacks the ability and motivation to do something themselves, they become dependent on others. Even if Steve felt a sense of crisis about his low sales performance, without the ability to act independently or the efforts he had accumulated, he would have no choice but to cling to others. And why did you resign? If you were here, this wouldn't have. Should I really have to explain this? But since it's not something I need to hide, I'll tell him. I told you after you took over the contract. I was already planning to leave Company C. That doesn't make any sense. There was a $10 million negotiation going on, and you just quit, just like that. If you hadn't stolen it, I would have stayed until the negotiation was finished. I had already discussed resigning with the president and submitted my resignation letter, planning to leave Company C once the negotiation was over. I was being scouted by another company, and if the treatment at Company C didn't improve, I was going to switch jobs. I had been scouted by a major company called T Corporation. When I was out on sales, they seemed interested and asked me to join them. The terms offered by T Corporation were very attractive to me, and I also wanted the career boost that working at T Corporation would provide. So, while reporting the progress of the $10 million negotiation, I was negotiating with the president about improving my treatment at Company C. I presented the conditions offered by T Corporation to the president and asked for an improvement in my terms. The president considered my performance and the internal situation of the company and suggested several improvements, but none were what I wanted. Therefore, I thought it would be better to join the large T Corporation rather than continue negotiating with Company C. So, I agreed to take on the $10 million negotiation entrusted to me by the president. But after that, I planned to resign. I was planning to quit after the $10 million negotiation was settled, but since you finished it for me, really, thank you. I thought it would take more time, but you helped me leave so much earlier. Damn it. Why is it always you? Being scouted is unfair. Whose connection is it? That's rude. I was scouted based on my actual skills. If it had been the old me, I could never have imagined working at T Corporation. However, I kept reflecting on my failures and earnestly improving my skills, and thus, an opportunity to join a bigger company came my way. Steve may be envious, but he never had any ambition from the start, always looking for the easiest way to earn money. So naturally, opportunities don't come to those who don't make any effort. That's obvious, but Steve probably doesn't understand that. After slacking off for 20 years and not building anything up, he will probably continue to cling to others for the rest of his life. It's shameful for someone in their 40s. If we're done talking, can I hang up now? Wait, we're not done talking. Even so, I need to call my new employer. Take care. Is Steve still trying to cling to me? Despite his attempts to hold me back, I hung up the phone. Got any good jobs? You've already decided on your next job, right? You know lots of good employers because you're so resourceful, right? Don't be stingy, tell me too. As soon as I pick up the phone, Steve starts ranting. Without reflecting on his actions and still trying to cozy up to me, I sigh at his words. Thinking about having worked with such a man makes me feel pathetic. Steve graduated from a reasonably good university and initially had better sales performance than me. Yet, he has slacked off for the past 20 years. Now, he even has a record of being fired. It's unlikely he'll find a new job easily. As I'm feeling exasperated, Steve asks me, "Hey, tell me, preferably something easy where I can earn money. Maybe your new employer is like that? Let me join with your connection. I can't find any work, and I'm in trouble. You're good at this kind of thing, right? Steve might think of me as some elite performer who's effortlessly succeeded, perhaps even assuming I got my job at T Corporation through connections. But he has no idea just how much effort I've put into getting this far. My university was only slightly less prestigious than Steve's. If we're talking about academic background and talent, Steve should be the superior one. Yet unlike Steve, I've tirelessly built up my efforts over the years. That's why there's such a big difference between us now. I didn't intend to bring this up, but to Steve, who was fired and still shows no sincerity, I had to say it. By the way, I heard you were embezzling funds at Company C. What? Steve, seemingly shocked that I knew, let out a startled voice. Why is Steve looking for such a profitable job? While his laziness could be a reason, I knew there was a more urgent cause behind it. I had already heard from former colleagues at Company C. Steve needs to pay back the money he embezzled. How do you know that? His voice trembled. It seemed he hadn't expected me to confront him directly. He wasn't interested in incentives and didn't put much effort into sales. Now I knew why. Steve had brought this situation upon himself, facing a hefty compensation payment. Yet here he is, still not reflecting on his actions, trying to rely on others to find a job. Has he forgotten why he was fired? If it's known that you embezzled, surely you won't find a job, right? I guess your misdeeds are well known in the industry by now. No company, even with connections, would hire such an employee. That's not true. I'm in high demand. Really? If that were true, you wouldn't be trying to get me to help you find a job through my connections. That is. Hearing my assumption, Steve was at a loss for words. I spoke with evident irritation. Why don't you start thinking for yourself and find a job on your own for once? Relying on others can be an option in some cases. However, if you always depend on others, you end up incapable of doing anything by yourself. Whether it's improving sales performance or raising your salary, you resort to stealing deals or embezzling funds. Eventually, even in desperate attempts to secure a job, you end up depending on others like me to introduce you. Steve always chose the easy path, relying on others without trying to develop his own skills. That's why he's ended up so degraded. You really should think about why you were fired. But if you're involved, at least find me a job. Have you forgotten that it's because you stole my contract that this happened? Steve was speechless. Blinded by the potential for a large bonus, he signed a contract on his own, causing significant losses to the company and ultimately getting himself fired. I couldn't help it. I wanted that incentive. Then you should have made an effort yourself. This is what happens when you try to take what belongs to others. Goodbye. I ended the call. Why was he fired? If he had truly reflected on it, facing the obligation to pay damages, he wouldn't think to depend on me to find him a job. Yet, he hasn't grasped anything and hasn't tried to do anything on his own. There's no need for me to teach him anything further. You said to introduce you to a good employer, right? Don't be so cold. A month had passed since our last call. I was busy preparing to start at my new job. At that moment, Steve contacted me again. I had completely forgotten about Steve amid my own job preparations. If he was still reaching out like this after a month, I should have blocked his number. Nevertheless, curious if he had perhaps changed, I decided to listen to what he had to say. I can't find a job. If this continues, I won't be able to pay off my debts. From the phone, I could hear Steve's desperate cry. It seemed that he still hadn't found a job. He had made some urgent debt repayments by borrowing more money, but without a job, he couldn't make the repayments, and the fear of ballooning interest was terrorizing him. But it was his own doing. If he had made an effort to improve his sales performance, he wouldn't have been fired. Even if he needed to repay debts, he could have found a job and worked to pay them off. To be so helpless even in such a critical moment of life. What a pitiful man. People like you who can do anything have it so good. It wouldn't hurt you to share a little. Do you really see me that way? Of course. I envy people like you who reach the top without any effort. Steve truly understands nothing. He says these things without knowing how much I've struggled to get here. I had never boasted about how hard I've worked over the last 20 years. But overwhelmed by his misunderstanding and inappropriate comments, my patience finally ran out. I work hard and earn my keep on my own. Steve seemed taken aback by my words, even over the phone. I'm not particularly clever, and initially my sales performance was worse than Steve's. Despite this, I diligently continued my work and gradually improved my sales numbers. This attitude was recognized by other employees, which is why I was able to receive a scouting offer from a larger trading company. It infuriates me to be accused of having no effort behind my success, being conveniently labeled talented or elite. That is. Have you done anything on your own to improve your skills? Steve fell silent. He couldn't argue because he hadn't done anything. Did you tirelessly make outside sales calls to boost your sales performance? No, you didn't. Steve said he hated sweating it out on sales calls. He found improving his sales performance too bothersome, so he resorted to embezzlement. Even when in a tight spot, he still looks to others for a job. Despite needing to pay off his debts, he refuses to do anything himself. There's no reason for me to show sympathy to such a man. Someone who hasn't made any effort. Don't ever call me again. Always choosing the easy path and never making an effort himself. That's all there is to it. Since Steve remained silent, I hung up the phone. Afterwards, Steve tried to find employment through others, but was repeatedly rejected. He even asked his parents for help to pay off his debts. But knowing his lazy nature, they refused to assist him and kicked him out of the house. Furthermore, it seems other employees also reported that he had stolen their deals and borrowed money without repayment, indicating that Steve's situation was even worse than I knew. With a history of embezzlement and no substantial achievements due to his dependence on others, he couldn't find a full-time job and eventually settled for a low-paying part-time job. It's fine to look for an easy job, but you must not neglect to put in the effort. When you leave everything to others, you can't do anything yourself when it really counts. It's a valuable lesson that you need to think and work hard on your own. Since then, I have been working at my new company, T Corporation. While I miss working at Company C, my transition has led to better treatment and further career development. Naturally, my salary has increased, which has pleased my family. 20 years ago, when I first joined the company, I struggled to perform well due to my lack of savvy. However, I reflected on my failures, learned new things, and over time, I improved my sales performance. By accumulating effort, I gained the trust of the president, was entrusted with important contracts, and eventually moved to a better company. Results may not come immediately, but the effort you put in will not betray you. Therefore, I plan to keep working hard to enhance my skills and career, without thinking of work as a chore.